Inspire Podcast, where mental health meets real life. I'm your host, Samantha Ariza, mental health educator, therapist, mom, semi-normal human being, depends on who you ask. But overall, I want to be your go-to for real, relatable conversations about mental health, emotional wellness, all this healing and growth things that we hear about so much. Around here, we believe that mental health doesn't have to be stiff or scary. We keep it human, practical, and have a little bit of fun along the way because you know what? Life's messy, and we're all just trying to figure it out along the way. But I do like to say that this is not therapy or even really meant to replace therapy. This is just a way to get more information about mental health and help us along the way. Each week, you'll get honest insights, science-backed tools, and stories that remind you that you're not alone in this. Whether you're on your own healing journey or supporting someone else in theirs, there's always something here for you. So take a deep breath, get a nice cup of coffee, get a little comfy, and let's dive in. And today we have a conversation with somebody I've worked with in this company called Minding Your Mind. Minding Your Mind is a mental health advocacy group that does presentations about mental health. And Kristen is one of those presenters who presents about her own mental health journey. So today, Kristen is going to share a little bit about her life, her journey on mental health, and about a little bit about her presentations and advocacy that she does. I do want to include a trigger warning for this, though, because Kristen does talk about suicide, she does talk about substance use, and she does talk about the trauma that she has experienced in her life. So if these topics are too much for you, I would suggest maybe skipping this episode or just being ready to turn it off and take some safe space for yourself. But overall, let's dive into the episode and see what Kristen has to share with us today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk to us.
Yeah.
I know that I've heard your story a few times, and so I'm very excited to be able to share your story with others and for them to hear all the stuff that you have to say, because I know that it always touches me to hear you speak, and I know it touches a lot of people to hear your story, and so I'm so excited for this.
Me too.
Okay. So to start out, how do you usually describe your mental health journey in your own words?
I mean, I would say describing my mental health journey now would probably be just like all about consistency. Like as consistent as I can possibly be with the way that I take care of myself is like really extremely important. And it doesn't necessarily matter how I feel about doing those things. It's just doing those things anyway. I mean, I know for me, like if you were to ask me that question 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would say my mental health journey is like nothing but the world being against me, because that was my perspective at the time. I ultimately felt like that, like just like bad things happened to me and the world was bad. And that was just my ultimate perspective. But like looking back, I'm like, okay, like I had a lot of quote unquote like bad things happen. However, there are bad things that happen to a lot of people. And it's like the choices and the supports that were ultimately given and utilized that shape our mental health journey, if that makes sense.
Definitely, it does. Are there any really important things for listeners to know before we really get into the thick of it and talking about mental health?
I guess, you know, it's funny. I was speaking at a school yesterday in like north-ish Philadelphia, because that's where I'm from. Something that I was saying to them was, you know, obviously like we all have physical health, and physical health is something that we can't necessarily ignore. If you say like, oh, I don't have physical health, it's like, well, you have a physical body. So you have physical health. So you saying that it doesn't exist, that's just like being in some like strange denial, right? So like with mental health, we all have a brain. We all have like our own perception. It's just not as tangible. Like you can't see somebody's mental health just by looking at somebody's body as you would with physical health. So I guess the number one thing that I sort of want people to remember and acknowledge that like just because you can't see it, like you can't like pick it up, doesn't mean it's not real or it's not like tangible.
Yeah, I think that's always the best analogy because I know I use that a lot too. The idea of like, if you have like a broken leg, you go get help for like that broken leg. But sometimes when we're dealing with mental health, it doesn't feel as urgent as if we had like a broken leg. And so people don't necessarily always address it. So, okay, when did you first realize your inner experience wasn't matching how you looked and presented yourself on the outside?
Honestly, like ever since I could remember, like I always felt like there was something wrong with me. And it manifested itself in like inner critic, inner insecurity. I looked and presented like a very quote unquote like typical kid. I had all of the things I needed, all of the things I wanted. I grew up upper middle class. My dad had a good job. I had a stay-at-home mom, 2 older brothers, 2 dogs, had my own room, had my own bathroom. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I was so privileged. But all of my social interactions and the way that I sort of like viewed myself in my story and in my reality was everybody is better than me. So like even as like a elementary school student, I would watch kids play on the monkey bars or watch kids, you know, push each other on the swings. And my internal dialogue was those kids don't want to be friends with me or those kids are better than me. And it's really fascinating because I'm learning more and more throughout my journey that we are a product of our environment, we're a product of our biology, and we're typically a product of like how we're parented. And I came from an environment with my dad and I are super tight now. Like he's like my hero, right?
Yeah.
But like my dad worked a lot and he wasn't home. And, he brought monetary things home, but he wasn't there emotionally. He was barely there physically. So he was able to keep a roof over our head, but there wasn't much else there. So I didn't have a trustworthy relationship with a male figure in my life. Yeah. And on the flip side, the parent that was home, that was, to take care of me and nurture me and love me, which is like this, we think of like a stereotypical mother figure. That's what we think about as like a nurturing, loving, feelings-oriented person. My mother was somebody who struggled with alcoholism and struggled with an eating disorder. So, she herself, I would listen to the way that she spoke to herself and listen and watch the way that she treated her body and would look at that. And I wasn't old enough. I mean, listen, like anybody can pick up a drink at any age, but I didn't have the ability, right? So like even as like an 8-year-old girl, I would look at the way that my mom treated herself and how poorly, well, not poorly, right? But it was just how she was taught and how she was raised, where like she minimized herself, she hurt herself. And I mirrored that not through physical action, but through thought and the way that I talk to myself. So I honestly, like as early as I could remember, I knew that I was sort of predisposed in some way, shape, or form to have a little bit of I didn't have like a soft landing when it came to adolescence.
Yeah, no. I think it's very important to even think about like there's a lot that goes into shaping who you are growing up and depending on the environment that can play major roles in how you develop over time. Was there a moment where you thought, I can't keep doing things the same way?
I mean, it took me a long time because I went from this shy but also sociable girl, right? In like elementary school and middle school. I had a couple of friends. I was like trying out for sports. I like, was like testing the waters with putting myself out there. So like I went from like this internal critic, internal dialogue of like not good enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough. I always felt like I was like the last one to be invited to anything. Like whether or not that was true, I have no idea. It probably wasn't, right? But I, anytime people would laugh or talk, I always felt like they were talking about me. And ultimately it was because I had secrets. Like I wasn't sharing with other kids that my mom was in and out of the hospital or, going to jail or, in and out of treatment centers. Like I wasn't sharing those things because I didn't have the language in order to do that, right? Because we're typically taught how to identify our feelings in some sort of therapeutic setting, right?
Yes.
But like moving into later adolescence, like teenagehood was where all of that angst and all of those feelings, like they didn't have anywhere to go. So it was like, okay, we need to figure this out. And I didn't have any positive coping skills. So it was like, all right, like I'm going to start isolating. I'm going to see how that feels, right? I'm going to start self-harming because like it was my only way of controlling the way that I felt. I knew it would cause physical pain. So it was like, okay, I have control over my feelings. It was an outlet. It was a release. And then when substance use came into the game, when I started smoking and drinking, I looked at that as if it was like, at the time, like when I first started using drugs and first started using substances, if you were to talk to 16-year-old Kristen, she would have been like, I'm at the top of my game. My life is awesome, right? Because like I felt really good getting high. But as most people know, like you're not getting any real solution. You're not digging deep. You're covering and masking the way that you feel. And I found over the years that when we cover the way that we feel, they always come out in weird, strange ways that feel out of our control. So we go back to the thing that simulates control, which is the drug, the drink, the self-harm, the isolation, the lashing out. And then like it makes us feel like we're in control again. And it's this cycle. So, by 17 years old, like I had been to a lot of treatments or one treatment center, 3 behavioral health facilities, very low GPA, lost a lot of friendships just through like my behavior changes. And I knew at that time, yes, I potentially have a drug problem, but it was a lot deeper than having a drug problem. It was like I had a problem with self. Like it was like I had a problem with how I can reconcile the trauma, the grief, the loss. I'd lost my mom by suicide like earlier in my adolescence. So it was like I had a lot of feelings and thoughts that had nowhere to go. And, going into treatment in 2015 in February, like my dad brought me, he was my saving grace. And, I found myself being able to be in long-term treatment, which was like a privilege in and of itself at Care and Treatment Centers and another treatment center called Timberline Knolls. And it was through that treatment that I learned that like, I'm not supposed to feel happy all the time. That's not typical. Like that's not healthy to feel happy all the time or want to be stimulated all the time. But what is healthy is when we do feel shame or guilt or sadness or anger, instead of like shutting the door on it, it's exploring that feeling with another person, right? With a coping skill, through writing and journaling and gym and, and letting that feeling in, seeing what it wants to do, where it's coming from, and then letting it leave when it's time to leave. And it's so hard to be uncomfortable because like all I want to do is be comfortable 24/7, even 11 years later. So yeah.
No, I think that's so relatable. I think, and there's something there to talk about, like the idea of being uncomfortable. It's, nobody wants to be uncomfortable. So when those feelings do come up, we definitely want to like push them away or ignore them and just get back to that happy-go-lucky self. But it's like sometimes you can, and sometimes you just gotta ride out the feeling.
And we also like don't know. When we're new to therapy and new to positive coping skills, we don't have, and like when I say positive coping skills, like I'm talking about, not necessarily just like going on a mental health walk, which like I love a mental health walk, right? But like we're talking about For me, it's like I go to the gym 5 days a week. I love cooking. I love baking. And like, I love giving baked goods to my neighbors and like feeding my fiance because it's an act of service. Like, I go to 12-step meetings. I go to therapy. Like, all of those things like fill my cup throughout the week and throughout the month. They're not necessarily things that I go to if I'm in crisis, which they help, but I try to I try to go back to that consistency. But I think like when we're new to the idea of practicing these skills, we don't have the proof that it works. So there's a tremendous amount of faith that goes into, am I going to survive this feeling? Like, is this going to am I going to pass this? And I always tell kids that I speak to, like, no matter what school setting I'm in, I always say, every feeling has an expiration date. We just got to ride through it, and it's best not to do it alone.
Yes, definitely. Support is a huge factor. And you mentioned a lot of these like positive things that you're doing in your life. And, I want to kind of speak because those positive coping skills, those self-care things, because self-care is a big term we use. What about these things that you do, like fill your cup? How did you discover these things along the way?
So initially, they were all suggestions from friends in 12-step meetings, therapists, multiple therapists throughout the years, and like community support. Like I would look around and see at what other people were doing and be like, I kind of like that. So, I mean, when I learned about what worked for me, like I remember when I was in treatment, there was a kid that was in treatment with me that loved to do Sudoku. And I like picked it up and tried it, and I absolutely hated it. I was like, this is the worst. Like, how does this make you calm? Like, this is like making me more anxious.
Stressed. Yes. I make a joke all the time about Sudoku. I was like, I like puzzles, but Sudoku, I don't get math. So I think I need math skills to do Sudoku. And that just stresses me out. No, I don't have
there's
those skills.
A reason why like my major is corporate communications. You know what I mean? Like I'm not like an econ major or a finance. Like it's just not who I am.
Facts.
However, like I learned like, okay, like just because it works for this person doesn't mean it's going to work for me. And at my treatment center, they had this beautiful gym, and I knew nothing about going to the gym. I knew that I had a lot of negative self-talk surrounding my body because of the things that had been done to me and the traumas that I had experienced, right? It wasn't necessarily like the shape or the weight or what, it was just like, I wanted new skin, but I can't get new skin. So I need to be okay in this skin. And going to the gym and like learning and like watching, at the time it was, like little YouTube tutorials and like, working with the trainer there, it was, I don't necessarily need to like be lifting like 10,000 pounds. But what helps me is like, I know that when I go to the gym for 30, 45 an hour, I leave feeling better than when I walked in. Yes. So that was like a big thing for me. It was like, I'm not necessarily feeling numb or feeling overly happy but I felt like I worked through something. And I always joke, like there were times in my not even in my early recovery. There have just been times throughout my recovery where I would go on the Stairmaster. I would be like squatting or deadlifting or any exercise. And like halfway through, like I'll start crying. And like, I don't even care. Like I will cry in front of a room full of people because like, it's my way of getting that release that sort of replaced that release that I was getting from self-harm. Right. So it was like, but it was a constructive version of that. And then learning even later on in my recovery, if I don't want to go to the gym, I don't have to go to the gym, right? That like the gym is something that's supposed to like feed my spirit. Like if my body's tired, but I have a plan to go to the gym, I'm going to listen to my body, right? And I'm not going to use the gym as a punishment because anything that we do for ourselves can turn awry. It's all about like that self-honesty. And that's why being in therapy for me is so important because I can talk to my therapist about those things. So it's like accountability is also really important too.
So we got consistency, we got accountability, we got listening to ourselves. These are all like huge points that I think we need to do more. Like I know for myself, like even like listening Like this morning, I almost scheduled another interview, and I was like, no, I need the morning to unwind and get ready and just like exist, because it's been a tough week, and sometimes the productivity of it all makes us like ignore that, and it's like, no, I need to be good for myself right now, because I can't keep going this way, right? It's super important.
We do live in a world where we are rewarded for pushing ourselves to the absolute limit. Like, of course, like, would it be great? Sure. But how would you feel at the end of it? Drained, tired, like regretful. Like, I mean, this morning I woke up at 8 a.m. and I was like, do I want to go to the gym? And I was like, yeah, I do. Like, I'd really like to go to the gym before I do this podcast, because I know that I'll feel better about myself getting that external energy out of my system. Because, I mean, I've been a professional public speaker for 9 years. So it's like, I know that I get anxious before I do any type of presentation, no matter how long I've been doing it. And I know that if I go to the gym, if I go for a walk, if I like hang out with my dogs, that like that anxiety level doesn't necessarily go away, but it makes it a little bit more manageable.
Same. Yeah. This morning I thought about the gym, but then I was like, you know what, I traveled this week, and then I had clients, and, I have my kids. And so I was like, you know what, I need a slow morning. I don't need, as much as I love the gym, I didn't need that extra like exertion or energy out. I needed to reserve the energy so that I could end up doing this, because it's a lot.
And that just goes to show the difference between individuals, right?
Yes.
Like, it's like what works for you, and what works for me, but they're applied differently because we're different individuals. Like, people ask me when I'm done presenting, they're like, so what are you going to do the rest of the day? Are you going to rest? Are you going to hang out? And I was like, my gym bag is in the car and I'm going. And it's because like I get so jazzed up.
You're like, let's go.
I'm excited. And then I'm like, I'm not just going to sit in my house and just like be excited. Like, I'm going to like get the rest of it out of my system. And then typically the rest of the day is like, I'm going to just hang out and like make tea and read and play Fortnite and just like be a person. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what misconceptions did you have about mental health before you started your own journey, or even ones that you uncovered along the way?
I some misconceptions. I mean, honestly, like my first thought goes towards, I had about 6 years clean at the time. And I was going to a lot of 12-step meetings. I was practicing my positive coping skills. I was going to therapy. And at this point in my life, I had been without medication for about 2 years. So 2 years prior, I was like, I don't want to be on medication anymore. I don't know why, but I was just like, I want to see if I can do it, which is like silly, right? But I was like, I'm going to do that. And I was going to 12-step meetings, going to therapy, taking care of myself in a healthy relationship, externally crushing it in life. And every night, ultimately, like I would think about taking my own life. And I'd be like, how could I possibly feel this way? With 6 years clean, all of the good things happening in my life, I had made it so far. And my house is safe, and I have 2 dogs, and I have a partner, and like, I shouldn't be here. Like, I shouldn't be in this place. I should be better than this. And it was just sort of this reminder of like, recovery is a journey, and life shows up, and our internals show up too. And our mental health shifts and changes just as our physical health does. And it's like, there might be times in my life where I'm feeling good and everything's great. But at that point, I was like, I need to go back on medication. And I shared with my partner, I shared with my friends that these were thoughts and feelings that I had, passive, but nonetheless there and scary, right? And not being fearful of that thought and being like, I need to shove it down, but speaking about it. And because I started talking about it, the people in my life were like, okay, you feel this way, let's go get you some help. And I got back on my medication, and I've been on that medication for the past 4 years, and I have no want or need to stop taking that medication, because my mental health it's a part of my my toolbox is that medication. So I haven't had thoughts like that since then. And I feel really like humbled by that experience, that I can't muscle my way through it. And just because like you are in a specific place in your life, like externally you could look like you're crushing it. And then internally you could be like feeling like you're back to square one.
Yeah. No, and I love that. I know this is something you say even in your presentations about like having tools in your toolbox. And so like using medication and putting it as like another tool in your toolbox, I think is a great way to think about it. It's something that I even talk about with clients. I'm like, whether this is something long-term or short-term, it's just another way to get to the place where you want to be at this moment. And I think that's a great way to think about it. I know one of the things I usually talk about when it comes to your story, I use it in my Just Talk About It when we talk about the myths around like suicide. And one of the things you talk about is your best friend at the time. And I bring it up because I think it's an important thing, like a myth that comes up about if you tell somebody else that person is not going to be your friend anymore. And so I know that's a big part of your story is about your, what happened with you and your friend and your dad and suicide. So could you share a little bit about that? Because I think that's something that people sometimes need to hear about a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a good friend at the time, and it was like, I was like 15 maybe. And I had texted them 11 o'clock at night and was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And I wanted them, deep down, I wanted them to say something, right? But like at the time I was like, don't say anything. I'm just telling you this. And, that individual, instead of keeping that to themselves, like they reached out to my dad. And I was able to find myself in a behavioral health facility. My dad drove me there. I was able to do the intake. And I got to where I needed. And I spent about 5 days in that behavioral health facility. There's like a huge, like when you think about behavioral health facilities or like quote unquote psych wards, people think like they think of horror movies. They think of, like you're not eating enough. It's not clean. Like there's like all of these things that are negative stereotypes about behavioral health facilities. And like, they're not all built the same, but I mean, I had a solid experience in that behavioral health facility. Like I made friends. I did, you do groups all day. You talk about your feelings. You learn positive coping skills. Typically you watch a movie at the end of the day. Like you have snacks, you have meals, you have a bed. And it's just a place to be able to like, take you through that moment of crisis and to like build you back up. It's where you're able to like sort of re-enter, right? So like when I left that facility, I walked up to my friend and I was like, why did you do that? Like, why did you tell my dad? And I felt a little bit of shame, a little bit of anger. But, they said to me, like, I told your dad because I love you. And I told your dad because I've been worried about you for a really long time. And typically, like, our friends see the signs before anybody else does. Our friends will talk to each other first before they talk to a trusted adult or a therapist or a parent. So it's like, I always say to kids, like, you are each other's eyes and ears. You see each other at your most rawest. So like, if you're seeing something, the best thing you can do is say something to a trusted adult where you know that they're going to do something about it in a positive and constructive way. And, I'm still friends with this person. Like it was all, I was upset with her for like an hour, but like, if you think about it, like she did save my life. And I still thoroughly believe I would not be sitting here today if it weren't for her. Like I told her for a reason, and it's a lot better to lose a friendship than a friend to suicide.
Yes. And I think that's a huge message, because I think especially as kids, they hear like, oh, I heard my friend say this. It's more important to keep the secret than to necessarily share. And so I'm always glad that I hear that when you speak, but I also am glad that we can kind of like bust that myth every time about, if you hear it, you see it, if someone says something, that you definitely want your friend here the next day versus them gone.
Right. And also like kids are like, I don't want to snitch. I don't want to snitch. And I'm like, there's a difference between snitching and telling the truth. Like snitching on somebody you're getting something out of it. You're throwing them under the bus. Like,
yes.
Like telling the truth is like, you get nothing out of it other than helping that person. So like,
exactly.
They are telling the truth. Like she told the truth.
Yes. No, I love that. I love that. Oh, that's so good. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. But that's exactly why I've created courses like Emotional First Aid for Crisis Moments. Because sometimes what we really need isn't just time off. It's a toolkit for what to do when everything feels like too much. The course is practical, trauma-informed, and it's video lessons that walks you through how to ground yourself, regulate your nervous system, and make a plan right in the middle of emotional overwhelm. Whether you're anxious, shut down, or just need some help, I'll teach you simple techniques like box breathing, vagus nerve activation, and crisis scripts. These are things that you can carry with you everywhere. It's fast, it's accessible, and it comes with a workbook, so you're never kept wondering what to do next. You can find that course now at arizainspire.com and be ready for the next time you need some mental health support, because real support starts with real tools. Now let's get back to the episode. What led you to start speaking publicly about your mental health?
So it was very much like an accident, I guess. Like I knew in some way, shape, or form I wanted to give back to the community. Would I have thought that I would be doing it for this long? No. But every year I think to myself, like, do I still want to do this? And like, the answer is always yes. Like, I love my job. Like, this is full time for me. Like I do 150 presentations in a year. Like it's a lot of presentations.
Yeah.
But I was at a recovery high school called the Bridgeway School, which I believe is still the only recovery high school in Pennsylvania. So it's like in Philadelphia. And I was maybe at that high school for about a year. And the principal at the time, Rebecca Bonner, she was like, hey, how would you like to be of service for the day? And I was like, sure, I would love to not go to class. Like, let me be of service.
Yes.
So she was like, take the train into like deeper into Philadelphia. And I want you to speak on this panel and just talk about what we do. And like Mayor Michael Nutter and his wife will be there. It'll be great. Like you'll be so good. And I had zero public speaking experience at the time, but I was really passionate about the Bridgeway School. It saved my life, like being in a school with kids that are also clean and sober, having like the higher accountability, being able to feel safe in school, because like at my old high school, like I was sitting next to my drug dealer in my math class. Like, how am I supposed to get clean? So being in this school was great. And I spoke on this panel. Don't even know what I said. I just talked about how much I love the Bridgeway School. And there was a guy that worked on that panel, or that spoke on that panel, and his name was Carl. And Carl, we love Carl. He pulled me aside after, and he was like, when you graduate high school, I want you to work for us. And I was like, okay. And I was like 18 years old. And it has been 9 years that he trained me. I remember like one of the trainings, like it was like some sort of like solar eclipse, and we like watched the eclipse together. Like it's just, it was such a wonderful experience being able to be trained as a professional public speaker. But I wouldn't have ever known that, sometimes I still like think about the schools that I've spoken at, and, we're in the business of planting seeds. And I still wonder sometimes like how many people remember, or how many people were impacted out of the probably over 1,000 presentations that I've done at this point.
Yeah, no, planting seeds is such a good analogy too, but that's the problem. It's like, it's nice to plant the seeds, but sometimes you don't ever get to see them grow and see what comes from it. So it's a great job, but it's sometimes very frustrating, because you're like, I hope, especially I know with you, because I know you get into a lot of conversations with kids afterwards. And so I can only imagine how like you're like always thinking about that person who you had those conversations with and hoping that they're okay still.
That is my hope. And Like there were definitely people along my journey that I look back on and I'm like, thank God that they were there when they were there. Like, thank God I had that therapist that was available for me and, made the emergency session. Like, thank God I, was able to meet with that tech at that one behavioral health facility that like wasn't supposed to be in that day, but she was covering a shift and I had a nightmare and I talked her through it. Like, sure, she talked me through it. Like, it's, there are people that do play pivotal parts of our journey that make us the people that we are today.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you decide what parts of your journey you were going to share publicly? Like, what did you intentionally keep? Like, there's probably a lot of stuff you could have talked about, but I guess what went into that process of deciding what you were going to share?
Ultimately, it was, what can I share on a stage that I could be able to handle any backlash from and be okay. So like there are some parts of my story where like, if it was not positively received, I would be unwell about it. You know what I mean? Like I'd probably completely crash and burn because I would be too vulnerable, right? Like there's a very fine line because I am honest in my story and I do share parts of my story that are vulnerable and are real, but like I can't share everything because if I do, I end up being like a husk of myself. Like there are some things that are just between me and my therapist, me and my higher power. Like I can't be sharing that on a stage because there have been times like presenting at schools where, there will be kids that will be volatile. It's very few and far between, right? But like, yeah, I remember, me sharing about my mom's suicide and kids like making suicide jokes in the audience, right? And like, I still have 30 minutes of my presentation left. Like, I can't get up and leave, right?
Yes.
I mean, I can do whatever I want, but like, it's about the greater audience.
Yes.
So like, I know, is that appropriate? Absolutely not. Did I share with the staff what individuals were doing that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that kid at the end of the presentation ended up coming up to me and he was like, I'm really sorry. That was messed up. My dad died of an overdose 3 years ago. And I just didn't know.
He doesn't know how to cope. Yeah.
He wasn't ready for it. And it was like this, like some kids, they have some people, right? Not even just kids. They have this sort of like defense mechanism of you hit something too raw in me. So I am going to literally physically push you away. And, like not saying that it feels good to hear stuff like that, but I know that the material and the content that I present, like I feel very safe knowing I can share it regardless of what comes out of it. But there are other pieces of my story, childhood traumas, things that have happened to me that I'm like, I feel like I'm not ready. I might not ever be. And also I deserve to have my own anonymity. Yes. Like and my own autonomy it makes me feel like I have power over my story and gives me sort of more of a confidence.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's important. Like, it's always like, because even like one of my questions is like, how do you protect your mental health while being so visible? And it sounds like that's how you protect your mental health is can I share this and be okay? And so that's important when it comes to this kind of job is if you're sharing your such raw moments of your life.
Yeah. And it is like emotional. I mean, I have kids that come up to me and they're like, I have no idea how you do that. And I'm like, I do it because I needed it when I was a kid. Like I needed somebody to like get up on a stage in front of 900 kids and be like, listen, like this is the reality. Like, I'm not going to tell you not to do drugs. I'm not going to tell you not to drink. I'm not going to tell you not to self-harm. But what I can tell you is that this was my experience. This is how it affected me. And this is how positive coping, treatment, therapy, etc., further benefited my life more than that ever could.
Yeah, definitely. So what does support look like for the person who supports? Because you're a supporter. You support everybody with your story and things going on around you. So what does support look like for you?
support looks different from every individual in my life. So support from my fiance looks like I get home after doing 5 presentations in a row and I don't want to talk and I want to be on the couch, maybe get takeout and just like be together and like watch a show. It might not look externally like support, but it is. Support from my best friend, Alina. What that looks like is when I'm done presenting, I'll call her and we're not necessarily talking about how the presentations went unless like they went awry, which they rarely do. It would be like her talking about her day. So I could like listen to her and kind of like get outside of myself in like a healthy way. And, you know, it's like I'm able to like be an active participant, not by like sharing all of my things, but like just like being there for her. And also it's like, I love her. So it's like nice to have her presence in my life. Support for myself looks like it's like sounds like so mundane and boring, but like support for myself looks like I'm getting enough sleep. Like I like do laundry. My room is clean. Like, you know, the dogs have been walked. I pack snacks for the day in my car if I have a 2.5 hour drive. Like, it's like all the little stuff. Like, it doesn't look like a spa day. However, I'm not knocking it. You know, I would love it. But it looks like little gifts that I give future self. So like, I know that I'm going to feel more supported. Like future Kristen is going to feel more supported if I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night rather than midnight. Future self is going to be happy that Kristen packed her bag the night before instead of like waiting until the morning and like forgetting my little charger or adapter. Like it's just like, it's all these little things that make me feel solid and whole while also like allowing other people just to like hold space for me. And, you know, even when I talk to my dad, like my dad is like a big supporter in my life and, you know, he's a fixer sometimes, like he wants to like fix it. And we'll say to each other, like, do you want me to listen and just, you want to vent or do you want feedback? And that is like magic golden rule number 1 for any parents listening. If your child comes to you and wants to talk about something, even if you think it's not that big of a deal, just say, do you want to vent or do you want feedback? And they'll say, I just want to vent. And then probably by the time they're done, they'll be like, so what do you think? So it's like giving people a choice.
Oh my God. That's like, I say that in every presentation. I'm like, listen, this saves friendships, parenting relationships, marriages, all relationships can be magically like, I feel like solved and healed with just that one question at the beginning of any conversation.
It's amazing. You know, like it's crazy too. Cause like with Tim, my fiance, like he'll say to me, is there anything you want me to do more of or anything you want me to do less of? And I'm like, wow. Like,
I'm glad you're marrying that man.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like I was shook when he said that to me because it was like early on in our relationship. And like, I was just concerned about something and he said that and I told him and he followed through and it was like, wow, like that's amazing.
That is a healthy man right there. Yes. I love that for you. Oh, that's so exciting.
He's such an angel. I love him so much.
Oh man. But I think that's I think a lot of times in conversation, we feel like we have to have all the answers for the person who's talking to us. And I think sometimes we don't. I think of like Ted Lasso and I think it's hilarious because he's like, we need to be more curious than versus judgmental. And I think being curious, asking questions and just being, ready to listen is huge. And I don't think people realize that.
Right. There's a lot that happens when you just hold space for somebody to talk. Like I had a friend at the time and her kid's father had passed away. And I was maybe 19. I had no concept of like children or spousehood or anything like that. And she called me and was like, this happened. I'm going to his funeral on Friday. She was really jammed up, obviously. And I was trying to find the right thing to say to her. Like, I was like, I didn't know what to say. And I was sort of like stumbling over my words. And she was like, Kristen, you don't have to say, like, there's no magic sentence that will make me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
This is terrible. But you just picking up the phone and being there for me is what I need right now.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, okay. Like, this is how you be a friend.
Yeah. That power of just being there is the best part, I think. Yeah, there's just power in that, just being there for somebody. I love that. All right. For someone listening who feels stuck or discouraged, what would you want them to hear right now?
I would probably tell them that what you're feeling right now and what you're experiencing right now is terrible. Just like, it's bad. And I don't know how long they've been experiencing this. I don't know the intensity that they've been experiencing this, but it is taken up a chunk of your life and a chunk of your time, and you don't deserve to feel such a way, right? Like, you deserve love and empathy and reprieve. And I would encourage that person, if they haven't sought external help, to try, right? To like call or text 988 to like look for resources. I would tell them to go on mindingyourmind.org and like click the resources tab and like look for resources. But if they're like, Chris, I don't have the energy to do any of that. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm exhausted. I've tried that. I would ask them, who have you talked to about this? Because like, pain shared is pain lessened. And like, there are a lot of community supports that do exist. Like, there might be somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. My therapist that I have today, like my good friend Jess, like that's her therapist. And I was looking for a therapist and I was like, I feel discouraged. I don't want to do this. And she was like, you should call her, call Nicole. And I was like, okay. And I did a phone consult and like, I love her to death. But like, if I didn't talk to Jess about that, I don't know if I would have found Nicole. So, letting people know where you're at, but also like what you're willing to do. Like figuring out like where is like the uncomfortable zone and the unbearable zone, because you don't want to be like in this like unbearable space, but you do want to get a little uncomfortable, like, and that what you are feeling, whatever that may be, every feeling that we have does have an expiration date. I've said it before and I'll say it again. And doing it alone sometimes only prolongs that. And it's baby steps. Like, you're not going to feel better automatically tomorrow. You might not feel better automatically next week. But little tiny baby steps over time, you look back a couple weeks from now and you're like, oh, wow, like I made it a little further than I thought that I did. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. I love that idea of like finding out where you can meet, because it like meeting yourself where you are or being real with yourself where you are is, I think, a huge part of healing, is like, this is where I'm at. And I want to get somewhere, but I only have this much. And I think that plays a major part in it. That's awesome. I love that. What's something you needed to hear earlier in your journey?
A lot. There was a lot I needed to hear. I needed to hear, put down the bat, Chris. Put down the bat. Stop beating the shit out of yourself. Like it's okay. Like, you're a child. You're a baby. Like, you need to just like take a step back and let some adult in your life step forward, and you need to trust that adult. Because like, I didn't trust, as a kid, I didn't trust anybody. I was like, absolutely not. Like, I was like, I have trust issues, which like was fair. Like, I had gone through a lot of abuse. My mom was dead and I had a dad that I had very little relationship with. So it was like, my ability to trust was very thin. But there were people, like there's a woman, Suzanne, and she worked at like the front desk at my school, at my middle school. And like, she was a trusted adult of mine. she wasn't somebody that I talked to every day, like about my thoughts and feelings. But it was weird because it was like the consistency. I knew I would see her every day. And like she was like a stable adult in my life. Like I would have encouraged that little version of myself to be like, why don't you like Suzanne? You trust her. Why don't you ask her if you can talk at lunch? Right. And it's like, have like a lunch in her office. See how that feels. And like, and I wish somebody would have encouraged me. Maybe you should talk to that person about what's going on. Because I think my life and my journey, although it would still be tumultuous, I think I would have felt a lot less alone.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. That's great. All right. Last question. What is a boundary you're proud of setting?
Ooh. There are a few.
Okay.
I'm a yes person. I love saying yes to everything. A very good friend at the time told me many years ago, she said, just like how you schedule work, just like how you schedule the gym, just like how you schedule time with your friends, you should schedule relaxing time and you time. When do you stop working? When do you, can you do 5 presentations one day, 4 presentations the next, and then 5 the following? The answer is no, right? But I didn't learn that until like year 3. So I learned like saying no kind of forces people to respect you. You know, it's like, and it makes them appreciate the times that you say yes. Like saying yes all the time, like there's no boundary there. And they'll just, people, unfortunately, you know, people will take what they can get. You know, if somebody told me yes all the time, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to go to that person constantly. Right. But like my fear of saying no was like, this person won't want to be in my life anymore. This person won't hire me. This person won't, they'll use it against me. But the people that respect my no's are people that are still in my life today. Right. So that was one big boundary that I learned kind of middle of the range career. And I've thanked myself for it, that like, I don't need to like fill my schedule from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day, feel burnout on the weekends and then do it all over again. Like nobody taught me how to do that except for like society. So I love that boundary of like, this is the time. I'm not being lazy. This is the time where I am refilling my cup and recharging my battery.
Yes, no, definitely. That's something I need to learn lately, but yes, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. So I get it. But you have to schedule rest. Like your body needs it. And if it's constantly going at 1,000, you're going to burn out, and we need to slow our roll. But thank you so much, Kristen, for coming on and talking to me.
Samantha, thank you so much. This was such a lovely experience.
I love it. I can't wait for everybody else to hear it. But that's it for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with me and Kristen today. If you found something helpful, inspiring, or just validating, I would love for you to follow the show, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Do you want more tools for this mental health wellness journey? Then head over to arizainspire.com. There we have free resources, we have self-paced courses, we have our live workshop on resilience. At the end of the day, there's so many things to look into that will help you heal, grow, and show up for yourself. And of course, follow us on the socials. You can go to Instagram, you can go to TikTok, you can go to Facebook at Ariza Inspire Co. Because that's where we have these daily conversations about mental health. I share some tips. I give you the real on what's going on in my life. And at the end of the day, my friends, take care of yourself, and I hope to see you soon.